A soldier in God's army, assuming, of course, God is a libertarian. The Dr. K Show on VRN, the Vanguard Radio Network.
All right, welcome back. Big day today, big day. Gary Johnson, two-term governor of the state of New Mexico, and the 2012 nominee of the Libertarian Party to be the next president of the United States. Gary, welcome.
Kevin, great to be here. Wow, what a fabulous studio. I don't know if you talk about your fabulous studio on air, but holy cow, this is terrific.
Thank you very much. It's funny, you get to meet people you really respect when you have an opportunity to do this kind of a thing, and I certainly do. I do respect you in a lot of the positions that you've taken. One of the things I want to just throw out there, just for people that don't know, your background, you started out in business. You're a businessman. That's how you started.
So I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I've earned everything that I've had since I've been 17 years old, and I started working construction jobs when I was 17 because those were the highest paying jobs. And so when I was 21 years old, junior in high school, I started a one-man handyman business, me.
Right.
And actually grew that to employ over 1,000 people in Albuquerque.
Wow.
Became Intel's facilities contractor before the 286 chip. I sold that business in 1999. Nobody lost their job, and they're doing better than ever.
Great.
And for me, money has always represented freedom, and it doesn't take that much money to have your freedom. But
really
that's
doesn't.
where I'm at. That's where I'm at.
You should be. I mean, if you believe the popular culture, though, we should both be embarrassed because we've been successful in our careers. Because money is a dirty word, and as I said to you earlier, what poor person ever gave you a job? The answer is no. None. No poor person ever gave us jobs.
Well, and then for that matter too, I think at least my observation, so many people get to a point where you can only buy so many things, and like I say, for myself, freedom or money represented freedom, the ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it. That doesn't mean first class tickets, but it allows me to have this full-time unpaid job of running for president of the United States.
It's an ominous responsibility. It must be an onerous responsibility to carry the hopes and dreams of so many people like me who often don't get heard. Out there in the world.
Well, it is. I got the nomination last Saturday, so maybe I'm slowly taking the gloves off here because I am the spokesperson for the Libertarian Party. I'm the Libertarian nominee for president, so I think that gives me a certain license that perhaps I didn't have 2 weeks ago.
Right, and I'm wondering, what brought you? When did you discover libertarianism in your life?
Libertarian Party is 40 years old this year. And if you go back to 1971, I believe that I got a handout, a book that was being passed around. This is what it is to be a libertarian. Read the book and then pass it on. And it was a very short book, but I remember being struck by, holy cow, you'll always know where a libertarian comes down on the issues because a libertarian is always going to be about choice.
Sure.
Libertarian is going to always be about personal freedom and, of course, the responsibility that goes along with that. But I read the book, I passed it along, and at that point I knew that I was a libertarian.
Amazing. And why is it you think we get painted a little bit as, maybe it's an indelicate word, but, a little kooky? I think that was a word.
I think when you go back 40 years that the Libertarian Party got labeled kooky because that's the party that wants to legalize drugs.
Right.
Well, when I heard that, I wanted to understand what that really meant, and it didn't take very long at all to understand what was being said and how much sense it made. Kevin, I'm going to argue that because the country right now, because 50% of Americans right now support legalizing marijuana, that, the reason is we're talking about it. We're talking about the issue like we've never talked about it before. The more people talk about it, the better the issue does because we're talking about it. Well, who's ultimately responsible for that? Isn't it the Libertarian Party that perhaps has more responsibility for this getting to the tipping point? We're at the tipping point. So I like to look at this very positively. Yeah, that was the kooky party that wanted to legalize drugs, but here we are at a tipping point with marijuana. What else has the Libertarian Party been saying? I don't know. I think there's a real opportunity here.
Let's jump into it with both feet. Marijuana, just because it's one of the signature issues. It's on your website too. I I have to tell you, I've come full circle. I was a Republican. I drank the Kool-Aid. I thought Ronald Reagan was just the grandest thing that ever was. But then I started to understand a little more as I got older, and I began to understand what civil liberties really were. And I began to understand that it seemed like we were constantly having more. We were giving up more every single time a new administration came in, whether it was laws or restrictions or regulations. And marijuana was one of these things. I mean, I myself, I'm not a marijuana smoker, but I fully support the idea of legalization because, I mean, I look at what a mess prohibition was. It wasn't until they stopped it and said, okay, enough already. Okay, we've created the drug war. We created it. We fund it to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. And what has it gotten us?
Well, we now have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, 2.3 million people behind bars. China, 4 times the population. They got 1.5 million people behind bars. And this is the country of liberty and freedom? Well, not really. Not really.
I mean, it's remarkable. And you say to yourself, I mean, isn't it true that people should be allowed to do with their bodies whatever they want, within reason? I mean, certainly.
Well, and so legalize marijuana, control it, regulate it, tax it. It is never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, get behind the wheel of a car, or do harm to others, the same as alcohol.
Sure.
And I watched the Prohibition special the other day with Ken Burns on PBS again. And someone that was on there said, you know what, if we want the whole country to take up brushing their teeth all the time, let's just outlaw toothpaste and toothbrushes and just watch the people starting to sneak out into their backyards to brush their teeth.
Sure.
with toothpaste.
Amazing. We're talking to Gary Johnson. He's the he's the Libertarian presidential candidate recently appointed in Las Vegas. Gary, let me ask you another question. Prostitution.
Well, so prostitution, it is a service that I have never enlisted, nor do I have any intention of enlisting the services of a prostitute.
We agree.
But if I were to do that, where would the safe place be to do that? Wouldn't the safe place to do that be Nevada, where it's legal?
Yeah.
This really is a state's issue because Nevada has declared it as legal outside of Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, right? Sin City, go figure.
But, hey, you've got to be registered. You have to take clinical tests. So as a customer, you're not going to contract hepatitis C, HIV, sexually transmitted diseases.
Just like I think the porn industry adopted similar standards recently where, they were even going to say that you can't work in the porn industry unless you're willing to be accepted and tested and all these kinds of things. And it seems perfectly reasonable. I would imagine that would be taxed as well. I mean, prostitution.
Well, and the fact that we criminalize activity that goes on, but for those activities, the individuals involved would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. So we end up criminalizing a lot of personal choices that, hey, maybe we don't agree with those personal choices, but that's where it should stop. When it becomes government policy, we end up criminalizing individuals that otherwise would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens.
It's amazing. Anyway, TSA, recently TSA, they get a bad rap, but don't they deserve it?
They deserve it. They do. If I were President of the United States, I am advocating abolishing Homeland Security simply because it's redundant. I think it's incredibly redundant and that it costs us a whole lot of money and resource, and it really doesn't make us any safer at all. If I would have been President of the United States after 9/11, I would have never established the Department of Homeland Security, and I would have never established the TSA. I would have left airport security to the airlines, to the airports, to the municipalities, to the states. But if it's something that can't be gotten rid of because the law is the law and the President of the United States takes an oath to uphold the law, I guarantee you, as President of the United States, TSA will be less intrusive and as safe. And you see it every single day that there could be procedures that Granny doesn't have to go through the bone scan device, that the wheelchair doesn't have to be dismantled and put through the X-ray machine. It goes on and on and on. And I enter in the Constitution-free zone almost once every 3 days, I think, on average, and that's exactly what it is. We get to undergo a search without warrant, and We get to be treated like criminals.
It's funny. Recently we're in the process of building some new studios in New York City, and when we were over there, I was struck. I had not been to Ground Zero since the memorial, and I was down there, and I was walking around, and I noticed I was by Trinity Church, which is down, for those of you that don't know, it's down by Wall Street. And as I was walking, I noticed that New York City had become, it struck me, New York City had become really nothing more than a police state. I mean, there's a cop on every street corner.
Well, and they do pat-downs, or they do search, unwarranted search in New York City now, which is, isn't this why we fought wars, is that this is the country where that doesn't happen?
It seems like we've become less free. You know, we espouse these ideals of freedom, like you say, the fact that we have the highest incarceration rate in the world. I mean, the communists, we put more people in jail than the communists.
We put more people behind bars than the communists.
It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
And there's, you know, one of the subjects that we did not that long ago was we were looking at the death penalty. And because I myself, I grapple with it, you know, all the time. Sometimes the religious side of me says only God gets to kill people, and then you meet somebody whose loved one was taken at 9/11. You understand their position on this as well.
And this is was a very highly publicized reversal of position for me as governor of New Mexico. I went from supporting the death penalty to not supporting the death penalty, and here's the reasons. I have come to recognize that the government makes mistakes when it comes to the death penalty. And I don't want to put one innocent person to death to punish 99 that are. You know, Texas has a 2-year limit on appeals. And when I first heard that, I thought, well, that makes all the sense in the world. The fact that it costs more to have a person on death row than to lock them up for the rest of their lives because of attorney fees, well, that's crazy. Come to find out, an attorney gets someone off because they are absolutely, categorically innocent. What price do you put on that? Well, it's priceless, meaning, you know, there's no amount of money that isn't worth paying to get somebody that is innocent off.
What about the fact that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, though, his view of the world was they admitted to doing this? Would you support putting them to death?
Well, that's so. As public policy, what you have is you have individuals that say, "Hey, yeah, I did it, and I did it with great pride," and you can't write law that way, though. You can't write law that says, hey, somebody that's, that conclusively is guilty. And by the way, you know, when you listen to this and you don't actually understand the system, sure, there are those that are absolutely guilty, and we should just write laws for those that are absolutely guilty and apply the death penalty to those that are just absolutely guilty. Well, what reversed me on this decision was in New Mexico, there was the Vagos motorcycle gang, 3 motorcycle gang members, 2 men, 1 woman, who were convicted of killing a gay man in Albuquerque. There was an eyewitness to the event. After spending 9 years on death row, the eyewitness came forward, said she made up the story.
Unbelievable.
They reconvene a trial. After years, the judge says the witness is not credible. I'm going to let the conviction stand. Now, keep in mind, if these Vagos motorcycle gang members were in Texas, they would have been put to death by now. But this was now entering into year 10 or 11. Someone confesses back east to the crime to a priest and gives details of the crime that only the perpetrator would have known, conclusively proving that he did it and that the Vagos motorcycle gang was innocent. They were let out of death row, let off of death row after about 12 years. Well, with my legislation, I propose the same legislation for New Mexico as Texas had, which is limiting death row appeals to 2 years. Hey, after I found out all those particulars, I felt a little stupid, I guess.
It must have been an ominous responsibility as governor to have those things on your mind, like the fact that someone's life hangs in the balance.
Well, and I really appreciated the job. I thought it was really a blood-boiling, and I mean in a good way, blood-boiling experience to be front end of public policy that affects people's lives. So I walked away from my experience as governor of New Mexico believing that good government was really easy. It wasn't hard, and it started with looking at the issues first and politics last. And I think people saw that, too.
The people of New Mexico sent you back there twice.
Well, sent me back there twice in a state that's 2-1 Democrat. I get elected as a Republican, but I think what everybody saw was that it really was nonpartisan, that it wasn't political, it didn't have to be, and that government can function just fine with that. I also had the caveat of I may have vetoed, Kevin, I may have vetoed more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined.
Combined, right, I read that.
And how did that work out? Well, you think that when people hear that, well, yeah, I'm a Republican governor in a state that's 2-1 Democrat, the initial knee-jerk is, well, holy cow, you must have spent money like crazy and you really weren't a Republican. Well, I don't think Republicans do so well when it comes to the pocketbook, but you know what? I think I do really well when it comes to the pocketbook. The whole notion of what are we spending our money on and what are we getting, and standing up for the fact that, hey, I'm going to veto this appropriation for $250,000 for reducing dropout rates in Albuquerque, because I don't think it's going to reduce the dropout rates in Albuquerque, and isn't that the responsibility of the schools? And so what politics is all about is appropriating $250,000 for the dropout rate. That's addressing the dropout rate problem. Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. You're just kidding yourself, and everybody's vigilant to reducing the dropout rate. It's not like anybody wakes up and says, let's have an increase in dropout rates today.
Amazing. We're talking to Gary Johnson, 2012 candidate of the Libertarian Party to be president of the United States. Talking about dropout rates, let's talk a little bit about school vouchers.
Well, I was more outspoken than any governor in the country regarding school choice. I really thought that the only way to really improve education was to bring competition to public education. So for 6 straight years, I proposed a full-blown voucher system that would have brought about competition to public education. Now, running for president of the United States, what's the best thing that the federal government can do when it comes to education in this country? I would suggest that it's to abolish the Federal Department of Education. And here's why. Yeah. Well, the federal government gives each state about 11 cents out of every school dollar that every state spends, but it comes with 16 cents worth of strings attached. And hey, that's New Jersey sending it to the federal government in the first place and then getting it sent back. So it's really a negative to take federal money. Just do away with the Federal Department of Education, established in 1979 under Jimmy Carter. You know, this is if you just look at school performance and tie that with the year 1979, there is nothing to suggest that the federal government has contributed anything to any of our benefits. But anyway, get the federal government out of education. Give it back to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and that's what you're going to see. You're going to see some fabulous innovation, which I think starts with school choice. Those states that really take a cutting edge on bringing competition to public education, I just see it really, really an exciting field. The notion of educational entrepreneurs unleashed on our educational system to deliver better products, better services at lower prices. And I guarantee you there would be lower prices, and I guarantee you there would be better products and better services. But
free market capitalism works in education. It works. Free market capitalism is the best system that we have.
And I know that you see this all the time. Criticism of free market actually ends up to be criticism of non-free market. That's the criticism where it doesn't exist. Like healthcare. Healthcare in this country is about as far removed from free market as it possibly could be.
It makes you. I was thinking about when I was thinking about the school systems. There are places now all over the country. New Jersey's one of them where you have to go in, you have to pay your taxes, you pay your property taxes. They're allocated, a certain percentage of them anyway are allocated to schools. So you're paying taxes to support an educational system which fundamentally in many cases it's failed. You then send your children to private education. So in essence while one is a choice and one is a tax, but you're in essence being double taxed because you can't take that money that's in the bucket and say, well, I don't want to send my child to that school. I want to send them to this place.
And then now we have the Khan Institute on the internet,
right,
where you can self-educate yourself from kindergarten through PhD in virtually any field, and that comes with zero cost. So, there are schools that are experimenting with the Khan Institute on the computer, along with a teacher-assisted arrangement, and it works really well. But that's school choice, and that's those individual states making those decisions. And hey, that's the exciting part about giving it back to the states and having it a real competitive environment as to what's going to produce the best results.
I couldn't agree with you more. Let's switch subject up 1 second. Let's talk a little bit about the IRS, my favorite group. The Internal Revenue Service was able to, in their mind anyway, they justify all that they do, and one of the things that differentiates you, for example, from Ron Paul, is that he advocates the abolition of the Internal Revenue Service.
I do too.
Well, I do too. But we can't. We need money to run the government. We need money to run the country. So what replaces the IRS?
Well, I am advocating for the fair tax, or let's call it the less unfair tax. Mm-hmm. But abolish. So I'm advocating for the fair tax, which is abolishing the federal income tax,
right,
the federal corporate tax withholdings. No more withholdings from your payroll check. Those withholdings would come out of the proceeds of the fair tax. Abolishing the IRS. Eliminating the 16th Amendment, which allows for income tax.
Right.
I really think that it reboots the American economy. It's cost neutral over a very short amount of time. It is a 23% consumption tax, but the can of Coke that sells for $1 today would not sell for $1 if the fair tax were implemented, because you're going to take away all those embedded hidden taxes,
right,
to the tune of about 23%. You're going to take that out of the product. Coke is going to be able to sell their product at 80 cents to be able to make the same amount of profit applying the 23%.
Sure.
So it's the answer when it comes to exports, making our exports 23% more competitive. It's the answer when it comes to China. And it's really the answer when it comes to jobs, because in a zero corporate tax rate environment, if the private sector does not create tens of millions of jobs with a zero corporate tax rate, I don't know what it takes for tens of millions of jobs to get created.
Well, we've got the highest business tax rate in the world now.
Well, President Obama himself, 8 weeks ago, talked about reducing the corporate tax rate from 35 to 28, that it would stimulate jobs. Imagine taking it to zero.
Right. I'm talking about a way to stimulate jobs. Get the federal government out of my pocket. What about the Federal Reserve? Abolish it, clean it up, make it transparent?
Well, all the above. If given the opportunity, I would abolish the Federal Reserve. But what do we accomplish when we abolish the Federal Reserve? Yeah. More than anything, what we accomplish is transparency, and those important functions that the Federal Reserve does perform could be picked up by the regional banks. But what we need to do is we need to stop printing money. That's what we need to do. And so abolishing the Federal Reserve doesn't stop Treasury from printing money. They would still print money just like they did before there was a central bank, and just like countries that don't have a central bank print money. But we bring about transparency to the Federal Reserve. We bring the Federal Reserve back to its original mandate of price stability, which is a strong U.S. dollar policies, as opposed to now the dual mandate of full employment and price stability, which is really weak dollar and strong dollar. And it's the reason we have zero interest rates right now is because we would find ourselves in a monetary collapse.
Right. What about the gold standard?
You know, I favor the notion of returning to commodity-based currencies. Very complicated. Reagan commissioned a study. Put together a commission composed of Milton Friedman and Alan Greenspan, among others, to study how to bring that about, and they came up with the notion of competing currencies, the repeal of legal tender laws to make that happen. And so it can be done, and I like the notion, but it's very, very complicated. Really, the thing that we should be concentrating on is cutting spending, is slashing spending. I'm making 3 promises as President of the United States. I talked about my first promise. I promised to advocate on the part of doing away with all existing federal tax. Promise number 1. Promise number 2, I promised to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. Kevin, that's not promising to balance the budget because Congress is going to have to do that, but I promised to submit that document, which is a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending. I'm also promising to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue, and even though they'll end up overriding my veto, I am going to suggest that keeping those 2 promises will have spending at a level lower than any other possible scenario that you could come up with.
Wow. We're talking to Gary Johnson. He's the 2012 Libertarian candidate for President of the United States. Gary, let me ask you, the wars that we've gotten ourselves muddled in, we're the policemen of the world, we continue to be, we can't afford to be, but we continue to go out there. Is there something wrong? Maybe it's me, but is there something wrong when we get embroiled in these things with asking the countries that we defend and protect to pay the bills for some of this stuff? I think we shouldn't be involved in any of it.
I agree. The libertarian position on war is that this country is non-interventionist, and I'm a non-interventionist. I do not want to involve the United States military in foreign conflicts, unless, of course, we're attacked.
Right, that's a whole different kettle of fish. I agree.
That's what we have a military for, and I think one of the president's primary responsibilities is to ensure that threats are looked at, that threats are monitored, and that if someone's going to attack the United States, they're going to get attacked back. And then there's the whole notion of, hey, the trigger is cocked, the finger is on the trigger
constantly,
is it going to be pulled? The notion of imminent attack, but. Look, I was opposed to Iraq from the very start. I thought that I know there was talk of weapons of mass destruction, but I said in 2003, look, we have the military surveillance capability to see them roll out any weapons of mass destruction. If they do it, we have time to ascertain the situation and we can go in and do a military strike. But
Sure.
If we go into Iraq, this was 2003, I think we're going to find ourselves in a civil war to which there would be no end. Afghanistan, I thought that was totally warranted. We were attacked by al-Qaeda. We attacked back. After being in Afghanistan, though, for 2 months, I think we wiped out al-Qaeda. Let's round it off to 6 months. We should have gotten out of Afghanistan 11 years ago. Mission accomplished.
Right.
So I'm promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I think the biggest threat to our national security is the fact that we continue to borrow and spend to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar that we do spend. We're printing and borrowing money to that end. So a 43% reduction in military spending works out like so. Reducing our military footprint worldwide. Do we need 100,000 troops on the ground in Europe? Do we need 160 U.S. bases around the planet? I don't think so. So back to a 43% reduction in military spending. It's the military footprint. It's getting ourselves out of the conflicts that we're currently engaged in, the military conflicts we're engaged in. It's research and development. It's intelligence. It's reducing our nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500. Do we need to blow up the planet 10 times or might 4 times
be satisfactory, right?
Be satisfactory. And it's also the military in uniform and the civilian staff, support staff that goes along with the military in uniform. That is what would constitute a 43% reduction in military spending.
Let me ask you about civil liberties a second, because we're civil liberties kind of people. This intelligence that goes around, the world is the CIA, and now they're creating an entirely new surveillance arm of the Defense Department. But haven't we, in essence, 9/11 created an environment where it seems like, I mean, just recently Google is being investigated because while they were out doing their Google Maps, they were scanning people, potentially scanning people's cell phones and getting personal information. This idea of the police state, but the idea that we seem to be being monitored, whether it be a camera on a street corner or a policeman or more than one policeman on a street corner, where we're being frisked, you know, without a warrant. What's happening to the civil liberties of this country?
Kevin, I completely agree. I'm going to just shamelessly pitch myself while I'm on the show here too. Did you see the the ACLU report card on all the presidential candidates about 3 months ago? Well, for those listening that didn't, they ranked, or they gave a grade to all the presidential candidates. 24 Liberty Torches was a perfect score. Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum had 0 Liberty Torches out of 24.
Which is remarkable.
Newt Gingrich had 4 Liberty Torches out of 24. President Obama, 16 Liberty Torches out of 24. Ron Paul, 18 Liberty Torches out of 24. And Gary Johnson, and the highest grade, 21 out of 24. Something I'm very proud of. And it's the notion of just what you're talking about. Big Brother is getting bigger. This is 1984. It's here. Isn't this why we fought wars? Is to prevent a police state from occurring? And yet, that's exactly what we do have in place right now.
So tell me about Occupy. You spent some time down there, right?
Well, I share in the outrage of Occupy Wall Street, which is that this country is up for sale.
I agree.
I think that enacting the fair tax, I think that will issue pink slips to half of Washington lobbyists, because those lobbyists are there to garner favor for the individuals, groups, corporations that are paying them to be there to get them their special comeuppance in the marketplace. But anyway, Occupy Wall Street, the country's for sale. Politicians, both parties are selling it. And it's being sold. And I'm talking now about the fact that government can create a level playing field. And that's all government can do and should do. But the government picks winners and losers. And in that whole notion of winners and losers, it's not fair. It's not equal opportunity for all, much as it's becoming a fairy tale.
We're talking to Gary Johnson, 2012 Libertarian presidential candidate. A couple of weeks ago, I had the good fortune of interviewing Peter Kiernan. He did a book called Becoming China's Bitch. And, that title jumps off at people, but the book turns out to really not be what people think it is. It's more a testament to what we do to ourselves as a society that allows China to be the bank, if you will, to us. I think China and the United States need each other. There's this relationship, this, for maybe this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but a yin and yang type view of this. What's your position on China and what they're doing in the world economy and to us?
Well, first of all, you either believe in free markets or you don't believe in free markets. I believe in free markets, so that means that you don't believe in tariffs. If China wants to subsidize the goods and services that it's sending to the United States, who benefits and who loses?
Right.
Well, we would benefit because we're going to be the recipient, lower cost for goods and services, and they're going to suffer. And that's just the fact. And if you let the free market run its course, that's exactly what you're going to see. I reject the notion that China is a threat. I like the notion of competition. I like the notion that maybe China cures cancer. I mean, this is
right.
This is a world economy, and that and that we all benefit from advanced technologies. Who cares where they come from? But we'll all embrace it and take it up. I think I keep coming back to the fair tax. I think throwing out the entire federal tax system, replacing it with the fair tax, one federal consumption tax, really gives us an upper hand when it comes to competing with China. I think the whole world converts to a single consumption tax once the U.S. Ends up doing that. Also, of the dollar that's being spent worldwide on military spending, the United States is spending over 50 cents of that dollar, and we're 5% of the world's population. Right. China, by contrast, is spending 9 cents of that military dollar. So is China a threat militarily? Is China loaning us money so that we can turn around and go to war with them? I don't think so.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. Let me ask, but have the regulations and the government intrusions in our lives, have they taken their toll? Have they made it so America simply can't be competitive unless we push this monster out of the way?
That is the case. And I'll just go back to my experience as governor. They did another study during this presidential run on who had the best record when it came to jobs.
Right.
That was me. Well, my response to that was, and it was the same response that I gave as governor of New Mexico, was I didn't create a single job while I was governor of New Mexico. The private sector creates jobs. But what I did do is I created certainty. Since I appointed the heads of all the agencies, since I appointed all the boards and commissions, I basically controlled all rules and regulations. And rules and regulations got better on a daily basis, and the better had a root in just common sense. Less time and less money to have to comply with government, and government that's not going to make us any safer, government that's not going to improve our lives in any way. Well, if that's the case, let's just get rid of it. But I will tell you, Kevin, rules and regulations got better on a daily basis. Business went to sleep at night in New Mexico knowing that actually the environment for business was going to get better tomorrow. It wasn't going to get worse.
What about immigration? We've got a real problem. You know, we have a society where when people show up, they're given free health care, they're given free education in some cases, and we're at the point now as a society we can't even afford to take care of the citizens. What's the next logical progression? How do we solve our immigration issues in this country?
Well, starting out with what you're talking about, the notion that they're not paying for the services that they receive, and yet and let's just say that they're legal immigrants in this country, legal immigrants in this country not paying for their services. Well, I think enacting the fair tax really gets right at the root of this. Look, whether you're legal, illegal, a visitor into this country, or a U.S. citizen, paying a one federal consumption tax is unavoidable. So that really takes care of the tax issue. I think that we should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa. And now I come back to the fair tax again. Zero corporate tax rate environment in the United States. I dare say there are going to be some entrepreneurs that are going to be in need of a labor force, and perhaps legal immigration provides that labor force.
So you would say that people should have a ladder if they're going to come here legally. I'm talking about legally.
Yes.
They should have a ladder so that they can become legitimate citizens, tax-paying citizens?
Yes. Get a work visa. Make it as easy as possible to get a work visa, not a green card, not citizenship, but a work visa that would entail a background check and a Social Security card that applicable taxes would get paid. Don't build a fence. What an incredible waste of time and money. And then back to drug policy. Don't also discount the problems on the border that have to do with prohibition of drugs.
And if we taxed it and made it legal and decriminalized it, wouldn't all that criminality in essence evaporate?
It would evaporate. 40,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years. These are disputes that are being played out with guns rather than courts. Let's get these disputes in the courts.
It's amazing. We're talking to Gary Johnson. He's the 2012 Libertarian candidate for President of the United States. Internet commerce. You don't support taxing the Internet?
I don't think that there is anything that the government should fix when it comes to the Internet. Now, the fair tax would tax goods and services on the Internet.
That are sold.
Yes, the notion that's a fair, and I say fair. Let's call it less unfair.
Okay. It's amazing. You know, I'm standing here. I'm looking at some of the positions of the Libertarian Party. Keep it free. Keep it safe. Don't tax the Internet. Don't regulate a good thing. We've had tremendous innovation in technology over the Internet. I mean, it's made the world a smaller place where we communicate now like we've never communicated before. I mean, on May 18th, the big IPO, or supposedly the IPO for Facebook, is going to happen, and make a young man who's 27 years old a billionaire. I mean, I can't imagine. 27, I couldn't have handled that. I mean, I don't know about you. I mean, I'd like to try, but you know, we've been able to innovate, and it seems that whenever government tries to step in, they block that innovation.
I completely agree. Just keep government out of the internet. Nothing the government needs to fix, and of course we saw the protest by Wikipedia. I think Google went along with that protest, talking about proposed legislation before Congress that would offer up censorship, and saw how that might work. And just a bad idea. Bad idea.
Gay marriage?
Gay marriage, I think that it is a constitutionally guaranteed right. And President Obama's dialogue on this the last couple of days, I think effectively does nothing with regard to the issue, because he's going to leave it up to the states. I think that this really probably falls in the that this is constitutional. This is a U.S. constitutional right, marriage equality, and that this is where the decision lies, is nationally, not with the states. As an example, would there still be segregated bathrooms in the South if civil rights were left to the states? I think there would be. I think there would still be segregated bathrooms in the South.
Does it boil down to just pandering, simple pandering? What the president did?
Yes, and a good pandering, I guess. I mean, there's bad pandering, and then there's good pandering, and I think this was good pandering. I mean, it advances the dialogue. He
certainly, I think the White House may have stepped all over itself. You know, Joe Biden's been known to open his big mouth a few times and get himself in trouble. I think he preempted the president in making that he accepted gay marriage. I'm curious what people are afraid of. They talk about somehow gay marriage is going to destroy us, and the world, the universe will swallow us whole, and we'll see nothing but rampant perversion. And I'm talking about the extreme cases. You know, we have these people, they're legitimately afraid of it. Is there something to be afraid of that I'm not seeing?
I don't think so, unless there's something that I'm not seeing.
I mean, it just seems that there was a Kinky Friedman said, I think he said that he's all for gay marriage because he thinks that the gays should be entitled to be as miserable as the rest of us. And I guess, you know, what's funny about it is, you know, it's obviously a little tongue in cheek, but the point is, why get involved with people's bedrooms? Why get involved? What's the worst thing a stoner's going to do to you? I mean, he's not going to get in his car most likely and run you down. He may drive in the left-hand lane with the directional on for a bit of time, but and I'm oversimplifying, and I know that, but I'm trying to have a little fun with you. But really, isn't the basis of libertarianism that the government should stay out of the things it was never intended to be involved in? That government be involved in those things that protect us against force and fraud. That there are bad actors out there, and that's what government's supposed to step in and number one, administer justice if fraud has been committed against me, or force has been committed against me, or the threat of. Yeah, no, I agree. Do you think that these laws that get passed in places like California and Colorado that legalize medical marijuana, and I'm switching subjects, but legalize medical marijuana, is that just a backdoor way of legalizing drugs and hiding behind we're going to use medicine, we're going to say it's medicine? I'm struck by some people. I know you yourself for a bit of time. After you had an accident, you had taken a position and you used marijuana, but you use it medicinally. So the question is that in California? We'll use California as an example because we have these dispensaries where the federal government has essentially said we're not going to enforce federal law. We're just not going to close our eyes. And wouldn't it just be simpler and easier if everybody just could sit down and put our big boy pants on and say, why don't we just legalize this stuff? Stop trying to hide. Stop trying to cover it up. Look, there are medicinal reasons why people utilize marijuana. I get that. I agree with it. I understand it. But there's also people that just like to smoke marijuana. And it doesn't hurt you, I think, if I smoke marijuana. So why can't we just put our big boy pants on and say, guess what? People like to smoke marijuana. It's less destructive than a vodka I might pick up and drink and then get behind the wheel of a car. And, Kevin, that's the position that I take. I'm glad for medical marijuana that does not criminalize an individual's use of marijuana. But really, aren't we talking about
an individual and their choice, and perhaps it's not the smartest choice or a choice that we agree with, but as long as that choice doesn't put me or you in harm's way, why, now I'm back to the individual being able to make that choice. Legalize marijuana. Legalize marijuana, control it, regulate it, tax it. I will say...
What about big drugs like cocaine or...
Well, you know what? I think that when the country legalizes marijuana, and I was going to say that I think the first domino to fall is going to be Colorado this November. It's on the ballot in Colorado to legalize marijuana. The referendum is regulate marijuana like alcohol. In California, they have another referendum on the ballot, regulate marijuana like wine. I think that's a great title for the legislation. But when we do this, and when the first domino falls, it may be Colorado, but 50 dominoes are going to quickly follow after that. When we legalize marijuana, I think this country takes giant steps forward, recognizes, number one, that the world is actually a better place tomorrow. And what did we do from yesterday to today? We legalized marijuana. So the police can actually go out and enforce real crime. The courts aren't so packed. People are being let out of prison that were there for nonviolent drug offenses. I think when that happens, that we take giant steps forward and that we look at the drug problem or the drug issue first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. It's important to recognize that Portugal and Holland have both decriminalized drug use. Holland unofficially, Portugal officially.
Yeah.
Both countries have 60% the drug use as that of the United States. That's on a per capita basis, but that's marijuana, that's hard drugs, that's kids, and that's adults. Portugal decriminalized all drug use 10 years ago in response to a heroin epidemic in the country, and in the last 10 years has documented a 50% reduction in heroin use. Really, it kind of flies in the face of what you think would happen. So it's back to toothpaste and toothbrushes. You know, if we really want this country to embark on a clean all of our teeth campaign, let's just make it criminal to be in possession of either a toothbrush or toothpaste.
We're talking to Gary Johnson. He's the 2012 Libertarian candidate for President of the United States. A lot of people don't know you're a mountain climber.
Well, it's one of my hobbies. I've been an athlete my entire life. I remain an athlete. Now, 59, I'm 59 years old, so that's a little bit of an oxymoron. Competitive athlete, 59 years old.
Me too, as you can plainly see. For those of you looking on the internet, you know. Anyway, but yeah, you've been to the top of Everest. You've been to the top of Kilimanjaro. What's that like?
Well, I have a goal to climb the highest mountain on each continent.
I suppose being president of the United States would count among those things that we monumental, right? But anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt. Tell me what that's like, because I think it gives insight into your individual character, things that people might not know.
Well, so I always have viewed life as a journey, not a destination. If you view life as a destination, if you're going to Nepal and the only way that you're going to be successful going to Nepal is to get to the top of Everest, I think statistically you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be really disappointed. So what you need to revel over is the fact that you have the resources, the fitness, the wellness to be able to go there and attempt it in the first place. That's the journey, and that's what you have to love. So athletics for me, I really enjoy training. I enjoy working hard.
Isn't it the ultimate antidepressant?
I've found that to be the case, and I also maintain that there are a lot of things in your own life, for those listening, that may fill that same gap. Music, golf, art, reading, writing, who's to say? But find out whatever it is in your life and get as much of it as you possibly can.
What was it like reaching that top of Everest and looking over the world? What did it make you feel like?
It was a wonderful experience. It had been a goal of mine for almost 20 years, and to get to the top, it was a clear day. There are 14 8,000-meter peaks in the world, and they're all within a 200-mile radius of Everest. On the day that we summited, I would have seen all those 14 peaks. So really, it was extraordinary. It was everything that I hoped it would be. Nepal was, halfway around the globe, exactly halfway around the globe. The trek from Lukla to base camp, no running water, no sewage, no electricity. Really very spiritual. It was really terrific. It was just, and I went to Everest soon after being governor. I was on my way 3 months after I left the governorship. And another little caveat to my climbing Mount Everest, I actually broke my leg 2 months prior to leaving for Everest. So I actually left for Nepal with a healing broken leg that I thought would be healed by the time Summit Day rolled around, and it worked out.
That's terrific. We're talking to Gary Johnson, 2012 Libertarian presidential candidate. So let's take it all the way around. What about religion? What role does religion play in terms of government, separating church and state, as it were?
It just doesn't play a role when it comes to government, and so I was raised Christian, and I have come away from that realizing that the lesson learned, and I've learned this lesson throughout life, is just do unto others as you would have others do unto you, and I think everything works pretty darn well. But as President of the United States, I'm not going to invoke the name of God, and I don't ask God for direction, if you will, on what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Well, you're probably very pragmatic, and you look at this, and you're a businessman, and you make decisions based on the information at hand. I mean, and the reality, what you can touch, what you can see, what's empirical.
And I just came out with my book, 7 Principles of Good Government, and a couple of those principles are just the ones you're talking about. Be reality-based, find out what's what and base your decisions and actions on that. Always tell the truth. It's really hard to do any damage to anybody who's willing to tell the truth. Communicate. Get a job that you love. It's really difficult. Or if you don't have a job that you love, quit now.
Right, quit. Right. Stop doing it.
Stop doing it, and tomorrow get something that you do enjoy. And there's nothing better than waking up and doing that.
All the time wasted on negative and just hating what you do for a living instead of chasing a passion. I'm wondering, I look at the candidate like Mitt Romney. Okay, he's a Republican presumptive. Of course, we all have to say that, but everybody knows he's going to end up being the Republican nominee. But what is to become elected in America? It's almost like you have to be 3 different people or 4 different people. Some certain days you have to bow your head and be. We have to pray to God, and certain days we have to be, we have to be a little right of center and then a little left of center. It's refreshing to have someone and talk to someone like you who just looks at things and says, well, this is my position, whether it's popular or not. This is what the position needs to be because it's based on truth and it's based on what I believe. And I'm not pandering, and I'm not going to just tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. And I think that that's the difference starkly between a candidate like you and a candidate, let's say, like a Mitt Romney, who is forced to. It's like silly putty. They said, he sort of morphs himself and has to be something different. You're very straight, and you say what you feel. And even the question about religion, I mean, that was something where I'm sure many people wanted you to say, well, I pray to God each morning and ask him for advice. And the simple fact of the matter is, I pray to God every morning. He's not taking my calls. And I'm starting to take it personally. And I look, I myself, I'm a very spiritual guy. I've not been to the top of Kilimanjaro, but I was at a very comfortable base camp, and it looked great up there, except it was probably cold and wet. And I looked at it from the ground up. But you say that we're talking a little bit about the Wall Street folks and the Occupy groups, and aren't we all basically saying that at the end of the day, we want it to be fair. Okay, well, you invoke the president's words, fair. But I sort of get angry, and I'm fortunate enough, and I think you are too, to we've had a certain degree of professional success in our lives, and we should be proud of those things. But I don't want anyone telling me somehow that I have to pay for everybody else that doesn't get a job or doesn't work or is not willing to put the effort in. Why is it that I almost feel like it's us that are given the hard time, and we're somehow made to believe that we should not be proud of our accomplishments? I just don't see that. Why should one group have to pay more while another group pays nothing?
Well,
which is why the flat tax is so important.
Well, the fair
tax. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
the fair tax.
Consumption tax.
Yeah.
No, and speaking with a broad brushstroke, I think the majority of people in this country, I'm in this category, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're in this category too, where we are fiscally responsible and we're socially tolerant.
Correct.
And those are big categories. But, okay, that said, I think somebody with that philosophy can be homeless and point out the problems facing the country, point out the solutions that go along with them. But then you do come to a third part of this, which is having a resume to actually suggest that you could be President of the United States. I'm going to pose, or I'm going to present that I think I have a resume to suggest that I could actually do this job.
Well, you certainly have more of a resume than the guy that has it now. Well, I'm sorry to say. I mean, I could say something like that because, let me tell you something. I mean, he was a constitutional scholar, okay, but somehow he stood up in front of the rest of the country and said, well, I think the Supreme Court will find on my side with regard to the health care reform law I'm saying, and if they don't, veiled threat, if they don't, well, then I'll just work around them. I mean, I've created more jobs in the last 15 minutes talking to you than Barack Obama has at being President of the United States. I agree with you. Government doesn't create jobs. Get out of my way. Get the hell out of my way and let me get in there and do what I do best. Let me roll my sleeves up. I'm willing to put skin in the game. I'm willing to make investments. I'm willing to do the things that are necessary. But for goodness sakes, I mean, your resume, two-term governor, you understand what it's like to make things work, to put people at a table and have a communication, have an open dialogue, and listen to all sides, but you can turn around and make the decision. That's it. I imagine that you're the kind of a guy that listens, takes things to heart, understands processes, but at the end of the day, you make your decision.
And I'm going to suggest that process worked, that good government was easy.
New Mexico
hard,
and the citizens benefited.
Well, and it had a basis in everything that you talked about. Look at the issues first. And factually speaking, if I do get on the debate stage with Obama and Romney, I will have more executive experience than the two of them combined.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable. I mean, Romney's was a one-termer. He had to pander to his base, the most democratic, liberal, virtually liberal, most liberal state in the union. Well, maybe California, but the point is, but yet California has this this moniker it wears around its neck of being so overly liberal. But just yesterday, or they voted against the gay marriage. They banned it. They reversed their position on it. And that's the citizenry saying, we don't believe in this. Now, Ronald Reagan used to say you vote with your feet. So, I mean, if you don't like it where you are, I mean, does Gary Johnson say it's okay if California does this and Florida does that, but so long as the residents of those individual states, they make the decisions about the place they want to live?
Absolutely. And in that context, though, the federal government is there to enforce the Constitution of the United States, which allows us certain inalienable rights, regardless of what state we live in.
Do me a favor. Tell me which part of the Constitution, because I'm no constitutional scholar. Just refresh my memory. Which part of the Constitution dictates how much salt we're allowed to put on our food? Dictates what cigarette I'm allowed to smoke or not smoke, where I'm allowed to smoke. In New York City, I feel like a criminal. If I go and get a cigar and walk down the street, I feel like a criminal. I feel like I'm going to be attacked in Greenwich Village and piled on and beaten within an inch of my life because I have the audacity to smoke a cigar. Now, I'm not knocking people to the ground, shoving cigars in their mouths, forcing them, but look at me. I like ketchup. I like salt. I like food. Okay? Stop telling me how much salt I'm allowed to have, how much cholesterol I'm allowed to have. And I guess at the end of the day, what I want to get out of our interview and our time today is what Gary Johnson and the Libertarian Party says is there's a role for government, but that's a limited role.
And Kevin, I would just make a pitch to you that you should try and come out of your shell a little bit. I mean, don't be so reserved.
No, but the point of the matter is I get worked up about these things because here I'm sitting in front of a guy who can make a decision, capable, competent, former governor, businessman, For goodness sakes, you climb to the top of the highest peak on the planet, and somehow I have to feel as though I have to cajole and convince people that libertarians are not freakish. We're not going to do anything to you. We're not going to harm you. And if anything, we're going to free you.
Imagine a libertarian president is going to be the only president that's going to be talking about gun rights and gay rights in the same sentence. Libertarian president's going to be the only libertarian candidate for president is going to be the only person talking about slashing welfare spending and slashing warfare spending in the same sentence. I think it would be great to be the libertarian president challenging Democrats on civil liberties, on, come on, let's repeal the Patriot Act,
Absolutely.
the National Defense Authorization Act. Look, this allows for detainment of U.S. citizens without being charged, and assassination of U.S. citizens without being charged. This is why we fought wars in this country, challenging Democratic Congress on marriage equality, on drug reform, challenging Republicans to not spend so much money, to not be so status quo.
I'm wondering what would the found if you and I went back in a time machine together and we plucked out Thomas Jefferson or we grabbed Benjamin Franklin or we grabbed George Washington and brought them back, what would they think about what we've done to ourselves?
I would love to. We should make a movie.
You know what? I have an idea. We'll talk off air. But I do wonder what would they think. What did we? They fought. Talk about putting your life on the line. George Washington would be a criminal today had the British won the American Revolution. Okay? So you say to yourself, what is it that it's going to take for us to understand that we've wandered so far off those principles that the Founding Fathers stood for?
We've wandered so far off these principles, and yet to get back, it's not much of a directional change, meaning a vote can make a difference. That's the pitch I'm making.
Couldn't we just say no?
Vote for Gary Johnson.
Just say
president.
no. We're going to say when we talk about government regulation, we're going to invoke the old. We'll put the war on drugs in a more positive light, and what we'll do is we'll say, when it comes to government regulation, just say no.
And my experience, 750 vetoes, thousands of line-item vetoes. The debate, the discussion that went along with the fact that the earth is going to stop, that death is going to reign over the streets because Johnson didn't sign X, Y, or Z legislation.
Funny, it didn't happen, right?
And it didn't happen, and lo and behold, actually things are better.
New Mexico is still a state, I think. It's still in the Union. It's
still a state.
It hasn't
still
seceded, or as I said, been taken over by the rogues or the ultra righties or lefties. I think it's a testimony to you and your leadership that you can turn around and say confidently and competently that just prudent leadership, prudent management of resources, being fiscally responsible. These are all basic things. In many cases, our mothers taught us. Just don't spend more than you have in your pocket.
Well, and treat taxpayer dollars like they're your own, because they are.
They are your own. Exactly
your
right. They
own.
are your own.
Yeah.
And I think people forget that. When the GSA spends $800,000 of our money and we somehow laugh at it. I mean, we watch it on television, but it's made to almost be laughable, but it's a tragedy.
Well, and the tragedy is also the retirements within government. Retirements within government that just so far exceed what can be got in the private sector, and the fact that individuals right now are retiring at the age of 40.
Right. Some are going on disability. They can't find work, so they're going on long-term disability. What's left?
Well, I think of the state police officer in New Mexico that has an 18-year, 20-year retirement, goes to work at 18 years old, and there are cases of this where they retire at age 38 with 80% of their salary, the top 3 years' salary for the rest of their lives, and I have a feeling a few of them are going to live to 100. It's not sustainable. Promises made that should have never been made, and yet it just continues. Turn the page, and tomorrow we're going to be doing the same thing.
And what do you think? What is the first day of a Gary Johnson presidency? You walk into the White House, and you do what?
Same thing as governor of New Mexico. Is before I got the inauguration, I immersed myself in the dollars and cents of government. What are the revenue sources? What are we spending our money on? Where are the problems? And Did that for about 6 weeks straight, and came into office finding myself understanding more about the budget than just about anybody in the legislature.
What was it like being a businessman and then looking at government? Was it maddening?
It wasn't at all. It was there was just such low hanging fruit that better government was.
Was it easy?
Yes, it was easy. It was easy. It wasn't hard.
It wasn't as difficult as people think.
No, it wasn't at all.
It make you want to walk off a bridge, and you probably looked at it and said, well, of course this makes sense. This is the way we're going to do it. This is the way a business would do it.
And I loved the debate and the discussion over the lower cost of goods and services, meaning I was always advocating on the part of lower costs, however those could be achieved. And by lower costs, without a sacrifice to quality of the goods and services.
So, do you think America will be saved? Will we see the folly of our ways as a people?
I have been an optimist my entire life, and I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't have given the last 2.5 years of my life if I wasn't an optimist and didn't believe that it can be saved. But it's got to be done now. I'm afraid there really is no tomorrow. You know, we talk about Greece and the fact that Greece is in such horrible shape, 160% of debt to GDP. We're 6 to 8 years, 6 years short end, 8 years long end from statistically being Greece. And we're not going to collapse like Greece has because we can print money, but the effect of printing money is going to be a greatly devalued dollar. At a point, the dollars that we have aren't going to buy anything, and that's the outcome of all of this. And it's not government that's going to drive this; it's going to be the bond market. It's going to be the bond market that brings about this justice. And if anybody thinks it's not going to happen, well, gosh, I would really like a new bike for Christmas if you could tell Santa Claus.
Oh, Santa Claus! But I'm wondering, why is it that you think the mainstream media, anyway, why do you think that they don't give more airing of these ideas, the libertarian ideas?
I can only guess, but they don't. And I
mean, they cut you out of debates for no very good reason. You're a qualified candidate, certainly, as we said, with a pedigree and a resume that makes you more than capable. Why does it seem like they just put a block up?
I can only guess. CNN really cast this in stone for me by saying that I had to be at 2% in A, B, and C poll, and I wasn't in A, B, and C poll to be 2%. And then they included me in their biweekly poll for the first time ever this last summer, and in that poll I was tied with Kane, and I was ahead of Huntsman and ahead of Santorum, and that's the last time my name appeared in their biweekly poll, never to return again. That's manipulating the process in a way that goes completely unnoticed by everybody.
All right, well, we've been talking to Gary Johnson. He's the two-term former governor of New Mexico. He's the Libertarian 2012 candidate for President of the United States. He's a damn nice guy. I wish people would learn more about the Libertarian view, and I wish people would take the time to understand that Libertarianism is about freedom. It's about protecting our society, protecting our civil liberties, and it's about protecting our future. And I thank Gary Johnson for taking the time to come in and talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
Well, Kevin, really enjoyable. Thank you very much.
No problem. All right, we'll be back.
The Dr. K Show on VRN, the Vanguard Radio Network.